The reluctant agreement Rohan Mehra stared at the skyline of Mumbai from his penthouse office, the evening sun casting long shadows across the city he had conquered through sheer determination and technological innovation. At 38, he had built Nexus Technologies into a global empire worth billions, yet something fundamental was missing. The emptiness felt particularly acute today. Another financial quarter, another record profit, he murmured to himself, setting down the quarterly report. His assistant Vikram had discreetly left a bottle of 30-year-old scotch on his desk as a congratulatory gift, but Rohan felt no desire to celebrate. His phone buzzed. Priya, his younger sister, was calling, undoubtedly to pester him about something trivial. He considered ignoring it but relented. "Paya, don't you dare decline my call." Priya's voice rang through before he could even say hello. "I know you're brooding in that ivory tower of yours." "I'm working, Priya. Some of us have companies to run. You're always working, that's the problem." Her tone softened. "Look, I met someone yesterday who I think you should meet." Rohan groaned. "Not another setup. I've told you 1,000 times." "Just listen," Priya interrupted. "She's different. She's brilliant. An environmental scientist who's developed a breakthrough in sustainable water purification. She's passionate, genuine, and completely uninterested in the Mumbai social circuit. That's what you said about the investment banker, the fashion designer, and the philanthropist's daughter, all of whom somehow knew my net worth down to the last rupee before appetizers arrived," Priya sighed. "I know you've been disappointed, but Zara isn't like that. She's been working in remote villages for years. She barely uses social media. I doubt she even knows who you are." "Everyone knows who I am," Rohan said bitterly. 3 failed relationships had taught him that lesson. The last one had ended when he discovered his fiancée discussing their prenuptial agreement with her lawyer, 2 months before he had even proposed. "Promise me this is the last time," he finally said. "After this, no more matchmaking." "Deal," Priya agreed too quickly. "Tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock at Café Terra. It's a small place in Bandra, nothing fancy. Wear something casual, no power suits, and don't arrive in the Bentley." After hanging up, Rohan poured himself a small measure of the scotch. One last blind date. Then he could focus entirely on the company's expansion into sustainable technology, a sector he'd become increasingly interested in, partly due to genuine concern for environmental issues, and partly because it represented an untapped market. Next evening, Rohan found himself parking his least ostentatious car, a modest Audi, on a tree-lined street in Bandra. He had deliberately dressed down in jeans and a simple button-down shirt. The cafe was quaint, with outdoor seating surrounded by potted plants and fairy lights. Nothing like the upscale restaurants he typically frequented. He spotted a woman, sitting alone at a corner table, absorbed in reading something on her tablet. Her curly hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a floral print dress that seemed both professional and relaxed. No designer labels, no obvious jewelry. Taking a deep breath, Rohan approached her table. "Excuse me, are you Zara?" Looked up, and Rohan was struck by the clarity in her eyes, intelligent, focused, and completely unimpressed by his appearance. "Yes," she said with a small smile. "And you must be Priya's mysterious brother who's too busy to socialize. Please, sit down." No recognition, no subtle shift in behavior that indicated she knew she was sitting across from one of India's wealthiest men. For the first time in years, Rohan felt the weight of expectation lift from his shoulders as he took the seat across from her. "I have to warn you," he said, testing the waters. "I'm not very good at these things." "Neither am I," Zara replied with disarming honesty. "But Priya was persistent, and I figured one evening of conversation wouldn't kill either of us." She set her tablet aside. "So Rohan, tell me something real about yourself. Not what you do for a living or where you went to school. Something that matters." And just like that, the final blind date that Rohan had agreed to with such reluctance began to unfold in a way he never could have anticipated. Unexpected encounter. Rohan blinked, momentarily thrown by Zara's directness. No one asked him for something real anymore. People asked about his company valuation, his latest acquisition, or which celebrity he'd been photographed with at charity galas. Something real, he repeated, buying time as he studied her. Zara waited patiently, seemingly unbothered by the silence. I have an unreasonable fear of birds, especially pigeons. A surprised laugh escaped her. Of all the things you could have shared, you asked for something real, he said, a smile tugging at his lips. When I was 5, I was feeding birds in a park when a flock swarmed me. My cousin thought it was hilarious and recorded the whole thing instead of helping. My family still brings it up at gatherings. Well, that explains why you flinched when that sparrow landed on the next table, Zara observed, her eyes crinkling with amusement. I'm terrified of elevators. I walk up 12 flights of stairs to my apartment every day. The waiter approached, and Rohan instinctively prepared to order his usual expensive wine before catching himself. This wasn't a power dinner. They make wonderful masala chai here, Zara suggested, seeming to sense his hesitation. And the vegetable samosas are incredible. Sounds perfect, Rohan agreed, feeling oddly liberated by the simplicity. As they waited for their order, Zara told him about her work, developing water filtration systems using indigenous plants that could be implemented in rural communities without external power sources. The technology exists, but most solutions are too expensive or require infrastructure these villages don't have, she explained, animated in a way that transformed her entire face. We've had breakthroughs using water hyacinth combined with locally available clay filters. The results are promising, but funding is always an issue. What's your biggest challenge? Rohan asked, genuinely curious rather than making conversation. Convincing investors that solutions for the poorest communities can be commercially viable, she said without hesitation. Everyone wants quick returns, but sustainable development is a long game. Their chai arrived, aromatic, and served in simple, clay cups. Rohan couldn't remember the last time he'd had chai this way, not served in fine porcelain by his household staff. And what do you do, Rohan? Zara finally asked, dunking a piece of samosa into mint chutney. He hesitated. I work in technology, he said vaguely. Software and systems development. Ah, another tech person, she nodded. That explains the calluses on your fingers from typing. Do you enjoy it? The question caught him off guard. People asked about his success, not his enjoyment. Parts of it. I started because I loved solving problems, creating something from nothing but lines of code. Now, he trailed off, surprised by his own honesty. Now there's more managing than creating. That's how passion projects often go, she said sympathetically. We start with dreams and end up with spreadsheets. Their conversation flowed naturally through the evening, touching on books they'd read, places they'd traveled, and childhood memories. Rohan found himself sharing stories he hadn't thought about in years, about his father teaching him to fly kites, about the first computer program he wrote at 11. You haven't checked your phone once, he realized aloud after nearly 2 hours had passed. Neither have you, she countered. Is that unusual? For me? Unheard of, he admitted. Vikram, my assistant, probably thinks I've been kidnapped. Zara laughed, the sound warm and unrestrained. And what would your ransom be? Tech stocks? Cryptocurrency? Probably just a promise that I'll attend fewer board meetings, he joked back, enjoying the easy banter. As the cafe began closing, they reluctantly gathered their things. Outside, the night air was cool and fragrant with jasmine from the neighboring gardens. I walked here, Zara said. My apartment isn't far. I'd like to walk you home if that's okay, Rohan offered, surprising himself. Usually, his driver would be waiting with the car running. They strolled through the quiet Bandra streets, passing old colonial bungalows alongside modern apartments. Zara pointed out a massive banyan tree. That's my landmark, over 200 years old. Makes you realize how temporary our problems are. When they reached her modest apartment building, Rohan felt an unfamiliar reluctance to end the evening. Had a wonderful time, Zara said sincerely. Much better than I expected, to be honest. High praise, Rohan smiled. Would you want to do this again? I would, she replied, then added with a playful smile. But next time maybe you'll tell me which technology company you actually work for, Rohan Mehra. His smile faltered. You know who I am? I didn't at first, she admitted. But the waiter called you sir with such deference I got curious. I looked you up while you were in the restroom. She shrugged. The founder of Nexus Technologies is hard to miss once you're looking. Rohan tensed, waiting for the shift, the calculated interest that inevitably followed recognition. Instead, Zara simply said, Your water conservation initiative in Gujarat is brilliant. But your company's carbon footprint from those server farms is problematic. You should look into algae-based cooling systems. They're 60% more efficient. She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. My number. Call me when you're ready to be just Rohan again, not the CEO. With that, she disappeared into her building, leaving Rohan standing on the sidewalk with her card in his hand and the strange sensation that something fundamental in his carefully constructed world had just shifted. Worlds apart. 3 weeks after their first meeting, Rohan found himself doing something unprecedented, clearing his afternoon schedule. Nexus Technologies' executive team looked bewildered when he announced he was leaving at 2 o'clock. Is everything all right, sir? Vikram asked as they rode the private elevator down from the 50th floor. The Singapore investors can wait until tomorrow, Rohan finished. The world won't end if I take one afternoon off. The truth was, in the past 3 weeks he had met Zara 4 times. Once for a walk along Juhu Beach, once for dinner at a hole-in-the-wall Goan restaurant she loved, and twice for coffee between her research meetings. Each time he'd found himself more drawn to her straightforward manner and passionate convictions. Today, she had invited him to visit her laboratory at the Environmental Sciences Institute, a modest facility compared to Nexus's gleaming headquarters, but evidently her pride and joy. As his driver navigated through Mumbai's congested streets, Rohan's phone buzzed with messages from his executive team, his investment manager, and his lawyer. He silenced it. Another first. The institute was housed in a repurposed industrial building in a less affluent part of the city. Rohan, dressed in his idea of casual clothes, still a designer button-down and tailored trousers, felt conspicuously out of place as he approached the reception. I'm here to see Dr. Zara Kapoor, he told the receptionist, who didn't seem to recognize him. A refreshing change. Zara appeared moments later in a lab coat, her hair tucked under a bandana, safety, goggles pushed up on her head. You actually came, she said, sounding pleasantly surprised. I said I would, Rohan replied, unexpectedly hurt by her doubt. Seeming to sense this, she touched his arm. Most people in suits say they're interested in water filtration. Few actually want to see the messy reality. The messy reality turned out to be a fascinating labyrinth of experimental setups, water tanks filled with aquatic plants and innovative filtration systems. Zara introduced him to her small team, a diverse group of scientists who regarded him with curious glances, but treated him as just another visitor. This is our newest prototype, Zara explained, showing him a contraption of clay, sand, and a mesh of water hyacinth fibers. It removes 97% of contaminants using completely biodegradable materials that cost less than 500 rupees to assemble. The implications for rural communities are enormous, Rohan said, genuinely impressed. Have you patented this? A shadow crossed Zara's face. We're a non-profit research institute. We want this technology available to anyone who needs clean water. But without patents, larger companies could profit from it? She finished, an edge in her voice. Yes, that's the risk. But we believe clean water is a human right, not a commodity. The tension between them was new and uncomfortable. Before Rohan could respond, Zara's colleague, Dr. Rajesh Kumar, approached. Zara, we've got the results from the Dharavi implementation, he said, then looked at Rohan with sudden recognition. Wait, you're Rohan Mehra, from Nexus? Yes, Rohan acknowledged, watching Zara's expression grow guarded. Your company tried to acquire our institute last year, Dr. Kumar said flatly. Zara's eyes widened. What? Rohan felt the ground shift. Beneath him. It was an exploratory proposal. We were looking into environmental technology investments. You were looking to absorb our research for your green technology marketing push, Dr. Kumar corrected. Our director refused. The atmosphere had chilled considerably. Zara's colleagues were now watching with open suspicion. Perhaps we should continue this another time, Rohan suggested quietly to Zara. Outside the building, standing beside his luxury car that now felt inappropriately showy, Rohan faced Zara's troubled expression. Was this all reconnaissance? She asked directly. Get close to the lead researcher, see what information you could gather? No, Rohan said firmly. I didn't know about the acquisition attempt. Those proposals go through departments I don't personally oversee. I came today because I wanted to see your work. He hesitated. Because I care about you. Zara studied him, her scientist's eyes assessing, measuring, evaluating. Your company made record profits last quarter from technology that directly competes with sustainable solutions. Your board members include 3 people who've lobbied against environmental regulations. The company isn't just me, Rohan argued. I've been pushing for more sustainable directions, but change takes time in an organization that size. And in the meantime, she gestured around at the modest neighborhood. The communities we serve don't have time. Climate change doesn't pause for corporate restructuring. A call came through on Rohan's phone, the Singapore investors undoubtedly wondering where he was. He declined it, something he would never have done a month ago. I'm not my company, he said softly. I'm trying to find a balance. Balance, Zara repeated. That's a luxury many don't have. My team works on shoestring budgets while corporations like yours have billions in reserves. Before he could respond, her phone chimed with a message that made her face pale. What is it? He asked, concern overriding their tension. Our funding for the Dharavi project was just pulled, she said, her voice hollow. The corporate sponsor decided our approach isn't commercially viable enough. The irony hung heavy between them. Her work threatened by exactly the kind of profit-focused thinking his world represented. Let me help, he offered immediately. Her expression hardened. With Nexus money? So your company can claim our research? With my money, Rohan clarified. Personally, no strings attached. There are always strings, Zara said, stepping back. That's something I've learned working with people from your world. Nothing comes without expectations. As she turned to go back inside, Rohan called after her. What about us? Is there still something to figure out here? Zara paused, her back to him. I need some time, Rohan. I believed I was getting to know, just a man. But now I realize I'm also dealing with an empire. Those are 2 very different things. Left standing alone beside his luxury car, with his phone buzzing insistently in his pocket, Rohan faced the growing chasm between the life he had built and the connection he had unexpectedly found. The ultimate test for 7 days, Rohan's messages went unanswered. 7 days of distracted meetings, sleepless nights, and a growing realization that somewhere between chai in a modest cafe and showing her his fear of pigeons, Zara had become essential to him. On the 8th morning, Vikram placed the business newspaper on Rohan's desk with unusual hesitation. Sir, you might want to see page 3. The headline made Rohan's stomach drop. Water crisis in Dharavi, experimental filtration. Project abandoned as funding dries up. The article detailed how a promising water purification initiative, led by the Environmental Sciences Institute, had been forced to withdraw equipment from Dharavi after corporate sponsors pulled out. It quoted anonymous sources claiming the technology was being courted by private companies, including Nexus Technologies. This is completely false, Rohan said, his voice dangerously quiet. We have no plans to acquire their technology. Actually, sir, Vikram shifted uncomfortably. Our acquisitions department has been in talks with the Institute's board. They prepared a proposal yesterday. Without my approval? Rohan was incredulous. The standing directive from last year's OI strategy meeting was to pursue all promising environmental technologies. The team was following protocol. Rohan stood abruptly. Cancel my meetings, all of them. An hour later, he strode through the institute's entrance, bypassing the receptionist who tried to stop him. He found Zara in the laboratory, surrounded by dismantled equipment and colleagues packing crates. "You think I did this?" he said without preamble. Zara looked up, shadows under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept much either. "I think your company did this," she corrected, setting down her clipboard. "Which amounts to the same thing, doesn't it?" "No," Rohan insisted. "I knew nothing about the acquisition plans." "Then you're not as in control as you think you are," she replied, turning back to her packing. "Either way, 3,000 families in Dharavi are back to contaminated water while corporate vultures circle our research." Rohan felt the eyes of her team on him, some curious, others openly hostile. He lowered his voice. "Can we talk privately?" In a small conference room cluttered with research papers, Zara faced him across a table scarred with coffee rings and ink stains, a far cry from the polished boardroom where he usually held negotiations. "I've halted any acquisition plans Nexus had regarding your research," Rohan began. "Congratulations on your benevolence," she said tiredly. "Is that why you came here? For gratitude?" "I came because I care about what happens to you, to your work, to those families in Dharavi." "Caring isn't enough," Zara said, frustration breaking through her composure. "Do you know what happened after you left last week? Our entire team worked through the night trying to figure out how to save the project. Dr. Varma's daughter has been hospitalized with typhoid, likely from the same contaminated water we were trying to clean. This isn't an abstract problem for us." Rohan was silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of her words. Then he asked, "What would it take to restart the project immediately?" "Money, obviously," she replied, "but also legal protection for our research, guarantees that the technology remains accessible to communities that need it, and a sustainable funding model that doesn't leave us at the mercy of corporate whims. I can provide all of that," he said without hesitation. "As Nexus Technologies? As Rohan Mehra," he clarified. "A private foundation, separate from Nexus, with you retaining full control of the intellectual property." Zara studied him, her scientist's mind visibly calculating possibilities and risks. "Why would you do that?" "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. Then, after a pause, "And because I'm falling in love with you, and I can't bear to see something you care about destroyed, while I have the power to help." The confession hung between them, unexpected and raw. Zara looked away first. "Love doesn't factor into environmental science or corporate politics," she said quietly. "Doesn't it? Isn't love for humanity why you work so hard for people you'll never meet? Isn't love for the planet behind every late night in this lab?" Before she could answer, her colleague, Dr. Kumar, burst in. "Zara, you need to come now. There's a situation at the Dharavi site." 20 minutes later, Rohan found himself in the passenger seat of Zara's weathered Jeep as she navigated Mumbai's chaotic traffic with surprising skill. The vehicle's air conditioning was broken, and sweat dampened his designer shirt. "You didn't have to come," she said, eyes fixed on the road. "I wanted to see firsthand what my world has cost yours," he replied honestly. Dharavi, one of Asia's largest slums, was a maze of narrow alleys and makeshift structures housing over 1 million people. Rohan had driven past it countless times but had never stepped inside. Now, following Zara through crowded passages where children played alongside open sewers, the abstract poverty statistics he'd seen in reports became devastatingly real. They arrived at a community center where dozens of residents had gathered around a local official who was shouting over their protests. Zara's team members were attempting to mediate. "What's happening?" she asked Dr. Kumar, who met them at the edge of the crowd. "Municipal officials are claiming our water filters were installed without proper permits. They're threatening to fine the community if they don't remove the remaining units," he explained grimly. "It's nonsense. We had all the approvals." "It's not nonsense, it's corruption," Zara said flatly. "Someone wants us gone." Rohan watched as she waded into the argument, fearlessly confronting the official. Her voice, usually measured in the lab, rang with authority as she demanded to see documentation. The residents rallied around her, clearly seeing her as an ally. A small girl tugged at Rohan's sleeve, offering him a cup of water with a shy smile. He accepted it automatically, then realized this was water from their filtration system, water that would become undrinkable again if the project failed. He stared at the cup in his hand, at the child's hopeful face, at Zara standing her ground against systemic forces, far larger than one official. In that moment, the divide between his world of corporate boardrooms and this reality of basic human needs seemed not just wide but obscene. Making a decision, Rohan stepped forward, joining Zara in the center of the dispute. The official recognized him instantly, the effect of his face occasionally appearing in business publications. "Mr. Mehra," the man stammered. "I didn't realize you had interests here." "I do now," Rohan said firmly. "And I'm very interested in why approved permits are suddenly being questioned." He pulled out his phone. "Perhaps I should call the municipal commissioner. We play golf together on Sundays, and ask for clarification." The threat worked. Within minutes, the official was backpedaling, assuring them there had been a misunderstanding. As the crowd dispersed, Zara looked at Rohan with a complex mixture of gratitude and wariness. That was effective. "The privileges of my world occasionally have their uses," he said with a slight smile. Walking back to the Jeep, they passed a wall where the Institute's team had painted a mural showing the water filtration process. Children had added their own colorful handprints around it. Rohan stopped, struck by the simplicity and importance of what Zara's team was doing. "I've been thinking about this all wrong," he said suddenly. "I've been trying to find a way to help you while keeping my life exactly as it is. But that's not possible, is it?" "What do you mean?" Zara asked. "I mean that loving you means changing how I see the world, how I use my position, what I prioritize." He gestured around them. "This matters more than another billion in market cap." Zara's expression softened slightly. "Those are nice words, Rohan, but words are easy." "Then let me show you with actions," he replied. "Starting now." As they drove back through Mumbai's congested streets, the gulf between their worlds still existed, but for the first time, Rohan saw a bridge being built across it, not by grand gestures or his wealth, but by the simple recognition that some things transcended bottom lines and balance sheets. Beyond wealth and status, the Mumbai business community buzzed with speculation. For 3 months, Rohan Mehra had been acting unlike himself. He had restructured Nexus Technologies' leadership, delegating day-to-day operations to his COO. He had personally announced a new corporate direction focusing on accessible environmental technologies. Most shocking of all, he had established the Mehra Foundation with an initial endowment of 50 crore rupees dedicated to sustainable water solutions for underserved communities. "He's having a midlife crisis," whispered colleagues at the exclusive Willingdon Club. "It's a publicity stunt," others insisted. "Corporate social responsibility is fashionable now." Vikram, who had worked alongside Rohan for 8 years, knew better. He had watched his boss transform from a driven but isolated tycoon into someone with purpose beyond profit margins. The catalyst for this change was no secret to him. She had a name, and it was Dr. Zara Kapoor. On a warm Saturday morning, Rohan stood not in his penthouse office but in a village school 2 hours outside Mumbai. Beside him, Zara was demonstrating their newest water filtration system to eager children and their parents. The prototype, developed by her team and manufactured with Nexus resources, was a breakthrough. Inexpensive, made from locally available materials and requiring minimal maintenance. "Remember," Zara told the children, "clean water isn't just about health. It's about time saved from walking to distant wells, about girls being able to attend school instead of collecting water, about reducing plastic waste from bottled water." Rohan watched her, marveling at how naturally she connected with people from all walks of life. Over the past months, their relationship had evolved through challenges neither could have anticipated. The initial clash of their worlds had given way to something more nuanced, a partnership where their differences became complementary strengths. After the demonstration, as villagers excitedly examined the filtration system, Zara joined Rohan, under the shade of a banyan tree. "The regional government wants to implement this in 500 more villages," she said, eyes bright with accomplishment. "It's happening, Rohan. It's really happening." He took her hand, still amazed that he was allowed this simple intimacy. "Because you never gave up, even when the obstacles seemed insurmountable." "We never gave up," she corrected him gently. "I had the vision, but you provided the platform to scale it. Neither of us could have done this alone." Their path had not been smooth. Zara had faced criticism from colleagues who viewed her partnership with a corporate billionaire as selling out. Rohan had weathered a temporary drop in Nexus's stock price when he announced the company's strategic shift. His board had questioned his judgment, his focus, his very sanity. What neither of their critics understood was that their relationship wasn't built on compromising their values, but on expanding their perspectives. "The Foundation Board approved the open-source release of all our filtration technology patents," Rohan told her. "Any community organization can now implement the designs without licensing fees." Zara's eyes widened. "Your legal team actually agreed to that?" "Not without a fight," he admitted with a smile. "But I reminded them that true legacy isn't measured in intellectual property portfolios." As they walked through the village, children ran alongside them, proudly showing off the clean water they had collected. An elderly woman blessed them, pressing sweets into their hands with tears in her eyes. "My granddaughter no longer gets sick," she told them in Hindi. "For this, no amount of thanks is enough." Later, as they drove back toward Mumbai in Rohan's car, no longer the Bentley but a more practical hybrid vehicle, Zara grew quiet, contemplative. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, noticing her distant gaze. "About how differently everything could have turned out," she replied. "If I had dismissed you as just another wealthy businessman, if you had written me off as an impractical idealist, if neither of us had been willing to step into the other's world." Rohan nodded, remembering how close they had come to walking away from each other. "I used to think success meant accumulation, money, power, status. You showed me it's about impact." "And I used to think wealth was inherently corrupting," Zara acknowledged. "You showed me it can be a tool for change when wielded with conscience." They stopped at a roadside tea stall, something the old Rohan would never have considered, and sat on simple wooden benches watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "My mother called yesterday," Rohan said, warming his hands around a clay cup of masala chai. "She asked when I'm going to settle down and give her grandchildren." He smiled. "I told her I'm more settled now than I've ever been, just not in the way she imagined." Zara smiled back, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "And what did she say to that?" "She said she's never seen me so at peace, so she can't argue with the results." He hesitated, then added, "She also said she likes you more than any of the society women my family tried to set me up with." "High praise," Zara laughed, though the bar was apparently quite low. As dusk settled around them, Rohan reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a reluctant blind date to partners in a vision larger than either of them had imagined alone. He had given up the isolation of his ivory tower. She had learned to accept help without compromising her principles. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out not a jewelry box, as she might have expected, but a small flash drive. "What's this?" she asked, turning it over in her hands. "The complete restructuring plan for Nexus Technologies," he explained. "Over the next 5 years, we'll transition 60% of our resources to environmental and public health technologies, starting with water and moving into sustainable energy. I want your input before I present it to the board." Zara looked at him with glistening eyes. "You're really doing this." "We're really doing this," he corrected, echoing her earlier words. I couldn't have conceived of this path without you, Zara. You didn't just change my perspective, you expanded my vision of what's possible. As they drove back into the city, Mumbai's lights sparkled like stars fallen to earth. The contrast between luxury high-rises and sprawling slums was still stark, but Rohan no longer saw it as an immutable reality. He saw it as a challenge they were equipped to address together. That night, standing on the balcony of his penthouse, a space Zara had gradually made her own with potted plants, hand-woven textiles, and scientific journals scattered among his business magazines, they looked out at the city that had shaped them both. When my sister arranged that blind date, Rohan said, his arm around Zara's shoulders, I agreed because I wanted to end the matchmaking attempts once and for all. And I only said yes because my colleague's wife, your sister, was so insistent that I needed to get out more, Zara added with a laugh. Now look at us, Rohan mused, co-conspirators in changing the world. One water filter at a time, she added pragmatically. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. I used to think forever was an unrealistic concept in relationships. Too many variables, too many ways for things to go wrong. The scientist in me would have agreed with you, Zara replied softly. And now? Now I think forever isn't about certainty. It's about choosing each other every day, especially on the difficult days. She squeezed his hands. It's about building something meaningful together that's bigger than just the two of us. Rohan pulled her closer, still marveling at how this woman, brilliant, compassionate, and completely unimpressed by his billions, had broken through every defense he had built around his heart. Forever isn't in grand gestures or wealth, he said, echoing the realization that had dawned during that life-changing blind date. It's in finding the one person who sees you, really sees you, and challenges you to become your best self. As the city hummed beneath them and stars appeared in the darkening sky, Rohan and Zara stood together at the intersection of their once separate worlds, now irrevocably intertwined. What had begun as one last blind date had indeed become the beginning of forever, not the forever of fairy tales, but something far more valuable. A partnership of equals built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and a love that transcended the boundaries of status and expectation. In the end, Rohan had found something his billions could never buy, and Zara had discovered that some compromises weren't compromises at all, but the opening of new possibilities. Together they were writing a new story, not just for themselves but for countless others whose lives would be touched by their shared vision of a more equitable world.